Hello, I'm Hannah with the Lethbridge Transparency Council, and I'm here interviewing Robin Walker, a candidate for Lethbridge City Council. Welcome, Robin.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So starting it off, what do you think needs improvement in the processes of City Council and administration, and how do you plan on making those improvements?
I think just with respect to engagement of our citizenry, I've been hearing a lot of people upset with things that have happened over the last, council's term, and it seems like they don't feel like they've been properly consulted or engaged with. And so I would seek to discuss with mayor and council different ways that we could maybe make it easier for citizens to be engaged, maybe how to notify them. I don't know if if there would be maybe an app and citizens could register and then they'd get notifications of different things coming up, like the municipal development plan or just other and then with something like that, maybe it would be easier to even ask citizens questions and get their input, as opposed to more traditional ways of getting in touch with people, or just listening to those that call, because that's going to be a small proportion of the total population, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. And that dovetails really well into the next question, which is just what recommendations would you make to engage more citizens in the city's municipal development plan and process?
If we had a platform like that to reach out to citizens more easily, then definitely to try and impress upon them the importance of hey, we're planning the future of this community, and if you want some say, we need to hear from you, because otherwise, if we don't hear from you, we can't, we can't read your mind, right?
Yep, absolutely. So, big question, what do you think the top 3 issues are in the community, and what do you plan to do to address them?
What I've heard the most about is the issues with just homelessness and the drug crisis, and in particular how that's affected the businesses downtown and people visiting downtown, and people being people's comfort level visiting downtown, I suppose. And then I've been hearing a lot about transit lately. I'd imagine just because of the recent changes and just how much it's affected people, and not just people complaining that, because of change, but it actually impacting their ability to get to work in a reasonable amount of time, or appointments, or, people taking night classes at college, university, and then not being able to get home in a reasonable manner. And, that's significant, right? And some of these people, of course, have turned to using taxis and stuff, which blows their budget for transportation, I would imagine. So as far as the transit goes, we need to look at how is it really being used? Is the way we have it laid out make sense? Or how many buses are driving around empty? Because that's pointless. So figuring out the where the highest traffic is and making sure that we're servicing that first. And we want to have as much coverage as possible, but if people in certain areas really aren't using it, then minimizing the those routes, I suppose. And then as far as the other issues go, we need to figure out what can we do to make a meaningful difference for the homeless and drug addicted residents. Obviously they've made efforts, but it doesn't seem to have made an impact. So we need to take a look at maybe best practices in other communities, maybe consult some professionals, maybe if we're finding that there's a high proportion of Indigenous population, maybe we need an Indigenous-led solution, something that addresses their culture and helps them with some of them might be having identity issues. They've definitely suffered traumas and all sorts of stuff that, especially when we've been hearing more and more about lately. And so to just really address those causes instead of trying to force them through a system that they're resistant to.
Mm-hmm. That partnership, I think, is going to be really important and really key moving forward, particularly in the context that we're in now, for sure.
Absolutely.
So what would you want the city to do to create a good environment for business in Lethbridge?
I'm really focused on local business and small business. I look at the development of our new communities, and I don't feel like there's really any space made for those businesses, right? You've got the box centers and all these franchises and stuff, and they're great. People like them, but what about encouraging local entrepreneurs and having space for them that's affordable, useful and accessible, and maybe developing like multi-use, or even just like kind of the classic Main Street type developments, but in these newer areas. I think there's lots of stuff we could do to support our local business and entrepreneurs, and I think we're not really trying so hard. And even just walking around downtown and down 13th Street, there's so many empty spaces that I don't know if they need to be rehabilitated, or what needs to happen there, or if just there's a lack of parking, or what it is. And maybe it comes back to things like transit, right? If transit was more accessible, maybe people would come to some of these places more easily. And then just, I guess we want to look at like, what's our tax rate, and is it reasonable and fair for all businesses, in particular, again, looking at our small and local businesses, because I think we want to support them the most. And if there's ways that we can give them breaks or incentives or other things to help develop those businesses, I think we need to take a serious look at that.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of different options, and I know Lethbridge has a lot of new developments, and so there's tons of things to consider with all of these new areas that we're growing into, for sure. So in the most recent MDP process, what decisions did you agree with and what decisions did you disagree with?
Yeah, so I had a look at that, and I printed off a few that I guess have stronger opinions about. So I definitely agree with some of the initiatives, like the Indigenous placemaking strategy, and there's something about a study for a cultural center site planning. I think that's really important, because again, that helps validate the Indigenous community and gives them spaces to gather and share and just kind of reaffirm their culture, and for those of our citizenry that aren't aware to learn more about it. So I think that's really great. I know the college recently opened a trail that gives information about Indigenous plants and stuff, which I think is awesome. I haven't been able to visit it yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to taking my children there. And then affordable housing, while I agree with that, I'm wondering, like, why aren't we considering maybe tiny home communities or something that would help more people at a lower cost? There's no reason we can't be innovative there. And I mean, there's other communities that have been exploring things like that. So we can look at, Calgary did a small community or a tiny home community for homeless vets to help them get back on their feet. So maybe looking at, how has that worked for them? And is that something that we could do? And where could we do something like that? Not necessarily just for vets, but, again, as affordable housing. And then, the bus service. So, the city hub, various locations, and then looking at, expanding that service, I think is really important. Although I don't necessarily agree with the move to the electric bus and charging infrastructure as soon as we have laid out. I was just looking at like other cities that are using electric buses and some of the problems they've been having. And I don't know that it's like all so smooth that if we were to implement that, it would necessarily run better than what we're doing right now. So I don't know if maybe that could be pushed back a year or two, and then we could still meet our targets when it comes to greenhouse gases and whatnot reductions by 2031. Because I see it with the plan they have here, they've got a couple years in between. So maybe to push that back a little bit, just to make sure that we're going to get the best buses, the most reliable, and then maybe that allows us to kind of complete some other projects first. And as far as financial strain in the short and the long term. And let's see. I guess those stood out the most to me. I don't know about. I was looking at the Southern Alberta Art Gallery facility expansion, and I'm just wondering about the timing of that as well. I mean, it's been closed for the last couple of years here. I don't know how quickly people are gonna engage with that sort of stuff, once we've settled out everything that's kind of the current events and whatnot. So I don't know if maybe that we might want to consider pushing that back a little bit, just again to complete some other projects first, and maybe see if there's ways to help finance it that aren't necessarily just coming out of the city coffers.
There's certainly a lot of different ways to finance something, and I appreciate you actually going through and giving some different suggestions on different programs that you're in favor of and that you're not. So this kind of ties back. You've talked a lot about transportation and transit, but how would you plan on prioritizing transportation in the future for Lethbridge, maybe more broadly?
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think like what they have here is good, except I'd put transit ahead of bicycles. So, pedestrian transit, then bicycles, commercial multi-occupancy, and commercial and multi-occupancy are maybe kind of on the same level to me. Because we want to make sure our citizens are getting around. I mean, obviously we want to make sure that commercial traffic is able to get around, but there'd be certain pathways for them as opposed to our citizens are going to be using all of them. And then just, when we're developing, like, I don't understand why every new community that's gone in, why we don't have bike lanes being put in when we're doing it. Like, why are we going to go back and do this? Like, that doesn't really seem to make sense to me. I mean, I remember when they put in the bike lane on 13th Street North from, 9th Avenue to, it's just like 9th to 10th Avenue, or no, sorry, 9th Avenue South. But anyways, on the north side. And it's like, okay, so I've got a bike lane from here to here, but then that's it. Like, it just seemed kind of ridiculous because, I mean, I like to bike from time to time, and it's just like, well, why would you do a little strip like that? And then for years, you haven't in any way expanded on it. And, I like what they did on 8th Avenue South. But again, it's kind of, it's been so piecemeal that to put it as a number 2 priority doesn't really make sense to me. And also considering, like, the seasonality of it, I think that, prioritizing transit over bike lanes is much more important. There's way more people that are using transit to get to and from work than would ever use bicycles, I think.
I know Lethbridge certainly has an issue with doing something and then going back and redoing it. They redid my road 3 times in a year. So I certainly can resonate with that comment. So where do you think the city should be spending more money?
Well, I mean, whether it's spending more money or just doing it smarter would be transit for one. I mean, I can think back to when I was a teenager, right? So we're talking like 30 years ago, and it hasn't improved. Like, I remember back then, if I missed the bus, I'd just walk because I'd get there faster than waiting for the next bus. And it's pretty similar now. And sometimes whether I make the bus or not, it might just be faster to walk. And I mean, I'm happy to walk, but I know there's lots of people that, that may not be an option for them. Maybe they have a walker or whatever. So again, those people are left with, well, if it's going to take me this long to get there, they end up just taking a taxi and they get there faster, but then at a higher cost. And then again, that's less ridership for the bus system. And it's just kind of a downward spiral from there. So I think at some point we need to really work to make the bus system work so that more people can use it. And I mean, when I used to work in an office, I'd be happy to take the bus to work because why does my car need to sit somewhere, right? But again, if it's going to take me an hour to get to and from work in Lethbridge, not so interested. So definitely there. And I think out of the other things we have here, again, maybe not spending more money, but looking at like, how do we make more affordable housing, exploring things like tiny homes and other innovative ways to build. And then also, green, like why don't more homes have solar panels or, and whether it's for electricity, for heating and cooling or, geothermal, things like this. We've got these targets for 2030 that I don't feel like we've really been moving towards. And, we're talking about doing it now, but, why haven't we been already,
Yeah, we certainly, council has a lot of things that they can do to incentivize that too, if that's something that they see as a priority. There's tons of different ways that they can make those green commitments a priority if that's something that they want, right? So it really kind of comes down to wherever council wants to go and what they see as important.
Absolutely.
So on the other end, where do you think the city could be reducing spending?
Well, I think the way we're developing, we might want to consider like more vertical development than like, what do they call it, urban sprawl. I mean, because for one, you're going to be spending less on, roads and intersections and all of these sorts of things. And I mean, there's plenty of locations, I would imagine, downtown and in some of the older neighborhoods where we could, as we redevelop, we could be building up and not having to extend the borders of the city so much. And then, of course, with that, all the infrastructure that goes in to support that. So while I'm not like, I'd say less on that sort of infrastructure, but with the caveat that we're still, growing, but I don't understand why we're not growing up more, especially downtown.
Yeah, you look at cities like Calgary and they have so many tall buildings and apartment buildings and things, and we don't have that same height in Lethbridge because we've got lots of space. So I could certainly understand that for sure.
Yeah,
so
we won't have that space forever, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually we will run out of space. So looking at these large capital projects, what criteria do you recommend that council looks at prior to approving these capital projects?
Well, one thing I wonder, I mean, not that it was, I don't know how involved the city was with the expense, but I look at like that Save on Foods building that's sitting there empty on the north side, and it's, the way it's designed and built and everything, there's limited use for it. So I guess that'd be one thing, is like, if whatever we're building the structure for, whatever purpose, if the building outlasts whatever business or organization is occupying it, how easy is it going to be to repurpose into something else? I think that, and I think I guess accessibility. I mean, back in the day, that wasn't really a big concern, but you've got lots of older buildings where it's like, oh, now we need to do all these things to make them accessible. So I guess we want to think forward to the future of like, what other considerations might there be? I mean, if more and more people start cycling, can we accommodate that? Or if less and less people are driving, like, whatever it is. And then I guess looking at like how much is the city funding and how much can we encourage, or is there some sort of a proportion that we want to see come from businesses or from other organizations or from the province or the federal government, depending on, what the project is and under whose government that might fit.
That's certainly a good thing to look at for sure. So the last question is just looking at the capital improvement plan for the next couple of years. What expenses are you in favor of, and what expenses do you not support as much?
Well, so like I already mentioned, I think, delaying the electric bus charging infrastructure, or at least considering that. I don't know. I didn't see in here or anywhere with respect to like our current fleet needing replacement. So, I mean, that might inform that decision, but if our current fleet can last a couple extra years, then maybe just pushing that back a couple. And then, yeah, same with the art gallery enhancements. I don't know that that project necessarily needs to start next year, just given kind of everything that's been and how soon what's being proposed here would be required. And then as far as what I support, definitely the affordable housing, although again, why we aren't looking at like, maybe some more innovative solutions. So whether it's tiny homes or different ways of building, because I think we could probably do better with less money there. And then addressing the bus service. So this, the studies they have planned for, the city hub, and I guess if it's not already included in there, engaging with the public to find out like where are the highest areas we need to service and at what times, and then how do we best accommodate our population and plan for increased usage of it, and how do we encourage more people to use it if we can make the service better so that people will. So I think those would be the four things that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know ridership data is really important when we're talking about transit to figure out where people are actually taking the bus and why they're taking it. Those are all really important things that play into that reimagining transit in the city for sure. So thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything you'd like to add or let people know how they can get in touch with you?
No, I think, people can visit my website. It's robinwalker.ca, and I've got a lot of my responses to questions on there so far. And as I go along, I'll post more. And then from there, they can link over to my social media or send me an email. And so my email is robin@robinwalker.ca. And I'd be more than happy to, hear what everyone is interested in and to take that to council should I get elected.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for participating. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hannah.